All right, great. Welcome, everyone. This is Pat Bailey. I'm the Director of Training at Out and Equal, and welcome to our Out and Equal University Marketing to the LGBT Community Part 1 GLAD overview of images, LGBT images. We're going to do a couple of announcements. We've got some people that are still joining us, and we'll catch that. Q, the blank one is Joe, and we just had somebody else just joined us. Who's that? That's from 410.
This is Zach Berger.
Zach? Okay, welcome, Zach, at 410. Okay, so just a couple of announcements things coming up. We are doing a virtual summit series. It's our webinar series that took a lot of the either canceled workshops or some of the best rated workshops from the summit in Baltimore. So if you didn't get a chance to go or you're interested in what the summit is about, the next one will be February 26th. All that information is up on the web, and you'll be able to register for those. Those are free, and we'll put them together as a package. It will be available after the summit. We're going to do Part 2 and Part 3. We thank everybody for last week's change. Rich was knee-deep in the Boy Scouts and kept him busy with that. So we rescheduled to start this week, and we'll extend one more week. So this will be February 20th and 27th coming up. We're also doing our Train the Trainer if you want to learn to be a trainer and take this back to the workplace, some of the basic cultural competency work we do. And our summit kickoff will be February 20th. So a lot coming up, all up on the website. You can always find out about that and get more information. So let me start with our webinar features. Today, during the presentation, your lines will be muted. We'll do introductions here in a second, then we'll mute your lines. Rich will go through his presentation, and Bob will be making some additional comments. If you want to talk to us during the call or you have questions or comments, go ahead and chat into the box right here at the bottom on the left side. Hit the send button. The presenters see those comments, and we'll track them either as questions or Rich may answer them as we go. If you have any technical issues, you can't see something, or if you have any questions on that, raise your hand, and Q or I will respond to you and talk to you about that. If we have some polls, and when a poll comes up on the screen, what you do is you go ahead and select your answer, and you hit submit, and then you'll be able to see the results of those polls. This session will be recorded, and we'll send up a follow-up email. If you have to drop off early or have any other technical problems, we'll definitely be able to get that to you. A couple objectives, kind of what we're looking at today is looking at some of the marketing images in LGBT communications and identify what those images are and what some of the best practices are, and how you can begin to start thinking about creating those images in your workplace. We'll have a poll in a little bit talking about what your company does and how you're doing media. But it's also something as a consumer it's really important to think about how we react and respond to images. And then obviously identifying some marketing opportunities. So with that, we're going to go through some introductions here. And I'm going to actually have Bob introduce himself as well. So Bob, name who you work with and why this course besides being a presenter.
Hi, everybody. It's Bob Wittick, President of Wittick Communications, and for the last 20 years, mostly have been known to the business universe as Wittick Combs. A year ago, just started out on my own, but my practice has been, and this course matters to me because this is the journey we're all taking to open up the marketing and communication strategies to reach respectfully and inclusively and accurately the entire LGBT household universe. That's a practice that I've started 20 years ago, and some of the, I think, the cases and examples we'll look at will show that evolution. So I'm excited because the journey never ends. We just have to get it better.
Excellent. Sounds good. Rich, how about you?
Sure. I'm Rich Ferraro. I'm the Vice President of Communications at GLAD. Prior to my work at GLAD, I was a member of Fleishman Hillard, a large communications firm, where I worked to introduce the LGBT marketing division of Fleishman Hillard FH out front.
Sounds good. Q, how about you?
I'm Q Wilson. I'm the Senior Training Associate here at Out and Equal. A lot of the stuff that I do deals with dealing with different companies all over the country, and a lot of times the information that they need does relate to marketing and strategies of that nature. So, and then also it's a great amount of material for me to have some knowledge on, just as a day-to-day thing here in the office.
Right. And again, I'm Pat Bailey. I'm Director of Training at Out and Equal. And we get a lot of questions about this when we teach a lot of our business case information about how do they do this. And so we definitely wanted to get Bob and Rich going. And If anybody's having trouble signing in, we're going to put you all on mute here in a second. But go ahead and go back to the original invitation from yesterday, click on the link, and use that OEU MK113 passcode. That will get you back in because it looks like we dropped a couple of folks off of the website. But if you have a problem and you can't get in or it's dropping out, we will have this recorded. So you should have the slides that came out with a reminder as well, and we'll be able to send you the recording. So let me do a quick poll with everybody that's online as we get started here. This is our first poll. So this is the media does a good job at representing the LGBT community. So is your opinion yes most of the time, all the time, most of the time, sometimes? No sometimes, no most of the time, no all the time? You don't know. Make your choice, hit submit. And Q, why don't you go ahead and mute us while we're doing this? But remember to unmute us, the presenters.
The conference has been muted.
Okay, so we're seeing polls are coming in. We've got just about everybody who is part of the call. We've got about 10 folks on the call, 9 folks on the call. We've got 8 responses in. Overall, 50% feel, yes, sometimes they do a pretty good job, but we have another 50% in the no column, no sometimes, and no most of the time. So with that, sense of the audience, Rich, let me turn it over to you, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. So I thought I would present today a brief history of the evolution of LGBT images in advertising, run through a quick case study of where we are in terms of anti-LGBT organizations and potential protests for corporations who decide to incorporate LGBT people and our community in their marketing and their advertising plans, and then speak a few ways about how here at GLAAD and in the overall LGBT community, we are working with corporate partners to advance LGBT images and advance ideas of equality. That being said, to go through a quick update on where GLAAD is today as an organization. GLAAD was founded in 1985 primarily as a media monitoring watchdog and a force to respond to anti-gay defamation that we were seeing in the media. The atrocious stories from the New York Post about the HIV/AIDS crisis, and across the media, an educational force to teach reporters how to speak about LGBT people in respectful and fair and accurate ways. 25 years later, a tremendous amount of ground has been covered because of the work of GLAAD and so many other organizations and activists, and we're really starting to evolve our role in the LGBT movement and in our broader American culture as well. Today, GLAAD sees ourselves as a PR firm for the LGBT community. Those everyday individuals who you see thrust into the spotlight, like Zach Walls, who's a young straight man out of Iowa with 2 mothers whose viral video was seen over 16 million times, like many transgender people who we see as victims of violence and their stories begin getting national and local attention. GLAAD is able to work with those everyday people and serve as their pro bono PR consultants, if you will. We're also seeing ourselves as not only reactionary and a responder to defamation, which does still happen occasionally, but also as an agent of cultural change, pushing for inclusion not only in our news media and on television and in film, but across various cultural institutions and media channels. A lot of our work today deals with the digital space and making sure sites like Facebook are safe for LGBT individuals, deals with media such as video games and comic books to push for more groundbreaking LGBT images, and deals with cultural institutions like the Boy Scouts of America, which I apologize again to everyone on this call for having to reschedule from last week, and I thank Pat and Q for being so flexible on that. For the past year, GLAAD has been leading a campaign to educate corporate partners of the Boy Scouts about the current ban on LGBT scouts and scout leaders, and also, in addition to corporate partners, working with everyday individuals who have been impacted by this ban, like a mom from Ohio who was ousted as her 7-year-old son's scoutmaster because she's gay. Some of our work has been behind the scenes on that, some front and center, but overall, last Wednesday you may have seen the news that the Boy Scouts are delaying a vote on the ban, and it just so happened to fall on the same day as this teleconference, and we had all the players in our GLAAD office, and it was a pretty emotional day for all of us working on the campaign, but also one where we began strategizing for next steps and how to make this change. We were also flooded with media calls that day and had everyone from CNN to NBC Nightly News to Al Jazeera in our office doing filming. So that's where kind of GLAAD is today. Our role in advertising and corporate America has also evolved because we've seen, of course, the impact of advertising on our broader culture, and that's somewhere where, as an advocacy organization, we really feel that LGBT people and our allies need to be very visible in order to continue this positive track of inclusion that we're seeing across so many aspects of our culture. Also, in terms of our programs, on the advertising front, several years ago, the Commercial Closet Association, which some people on this call might be familiar with, was a nonprofit dedicated to expanding the quantity and quality of LGBT images and ads. And since then, in 2008, the Commercial Closet Association became an official program of GLAAD. And in a full circle kind of moment, before I was at GLAAD, I was doing public relations work for the Commercial Closet Association, so I have some experience in LGBT images and ads before even GLAAD came about. So to start things off, I wanted to give everyone a brief overview of essentially the past 30 years of LGBT images and advertising. In the 1980s, Absolute Vodka is often credited with really breaking new ground and being one of the first to market specifically to the LGBT community. In 1981, they took out an ad in Advocate magazine at a time when really no other national brand was willing to. In terms of the images of these advertisements in the early days, in the 80s, and then also moving over into the 90s, it was really a reflection of the broader images that people were seeing of the gay community. It was the drag queens, rainbows, and white men on beaches effect. There was very little diversity in these ads, and it was also a very limited amount of companies or genres of companies really doing proactive marketing to LGBT people. Traditionally, we had the Absolutes of the world and the spirits industry and also the travel industry. Slowly I guess first to take a step back, advertising really followed our broader media. In the 80s and 90s, there were not images like Modern Family. There weren't images like Grey's Anatomy. There were really generally a lot of stereotypes out there on television and film, and also in advertising. There was also very little depictions of the LGBT community in mainstream advertising. It was really those first companies who were able to take a stand, recognize that the community was a good source of potential consumers, and to really market directly in the LGBT media, which at that time was where LGBT people were more and more going to get our news and to learn more about the community. Many of mainstream news outlets were not covering LGBT issues, and in order to get news on the community, you had to go to the Advocate and so many of the local LGBT media outlets. Another phenomenon that we saw in the early days of advertising was called the gay vague effect. Companies were not willing to specifically say that their models and their images were LGBT. In fact, if you look at some of the companies that we have in this presentation, these ads are from the late 90s mostly. And there's a sense of, are they gay, are they not, are they sisters, are they friends, are they lovers? It was kind of a wink and a nudge to the LGBT community, but more importantly it was brands who wanted to be seen as edgy, because at that time in our culture, accepting LGBT people, this is before Ellen came out essentially, accepting LGBT people was the edgy thing to do. It wasn't culturally accepted to do that. Today we're in a very different space, of course. And part of the work of Commercial Closet and media activists in the advertising world was to really push beyond the gay vague, to push advertisers to really take a stand and be front and center about their support for the community and the visibility of the community. So as the news and television media evolved, we saw the advertising community begin to come out as well. I kind of call this the Will and Grace phenomena, where gay and lesbian people were starting to be seen on television and in film, but also starting to come out in the workplace and in our broader culture. So we started to see companies begin to use gay couples and gay people in mainstream advertising campaigns. Many of the leaders in this space were Orbitz, which is the screenshot of that ad, which ran on Bravo in the early 2000s. Levi's, another Bravo advertiser, which had really a groundbreaking ad that showcased a gay couple holding hands, walking down the street, or almost holding hands. And then IKEA, which presented an interracial couple as a montage of families that was part of a television broadcast commercial. That ad, the IKEA ad, really began to spark a national discussion of gay couples and gay people in mainstream advertising. It was mentioned in the New York Times. It was mentioned in the advertising press. It was also honored by the Commercial Closet Association. That was back around 2007. So there was a big evolution from the 80s and 90s when we really saw white gay couples in LGBT media, or perhaps just a rainbow or a drag queen, and really stereotypes of the gay community, kind of following our news and entertainment media. In the mid-2000s, we started to see advertising begin to peek out of the closet door and go from strictly LGBT media into mainstream. In the last 2 years, there's really been a huge move in the advertising media and in LGBT images and advertising. And it's been a move really of one of diversity and one of a growing understanding of the LGBT community. And I think that's for several reasons. One, it's because of LGBT marketing firms who are now being hired by more and more national brands, firms like Bob and Wittek Communications. Also, a growing understanding internally in corporations, out executives who want their companies to do more in this space, and a growing understanding broader than that in our culture of who the LGBT community really is. One of GLAAD's main priorities of the past several years is not only a visibility of LGBT people, but visibility of our full community, visibility of transgender people, visibility of same-sex couples who are Black or Hispanic, and visibility of LGBT families.
Hey, Rich, one riff I would add to this evolution, those early images, of course, which were fairly narrowly focused and very demographically narrow as well. One of the things that marketers had said 10, 20 years ago, of course, is that imagery was hard to find. Stock photography and everything ended up being very narrowcast. Even if they had a bigger vision, they were discovering the same gay white men appearing everywhere. There was one time a bank campaign in which a white gay male couple appeared in 2 or 3 different ads for different products and services. It was just very hard. Today, you're demonstrating this photorealism too, is to create images that look like real people doing real things.
Exactly, yeah. Some of the best practices when we get called in for corporations to give feedback on their ad campaigns, which is something that GLAAD has done in the past and it still does today. Just the idea of running a potential ad campaign or images by us. Some of the best practices that we share is that the LGBT community is really looking for real gay and lesbian individuals. Bob mentioned the stock photography, and it can really be seen in in ad campaigns for the LGBT set because a lot of those stock image providers don't really go far for LGBT consumers. So we always recommend doing fresh and doing your own images. And it's also same-sex pairings in everyday situations. You can see the Wells Fargo ad of an elderly African-American female couple bowling. It's not the first thing people think of when they think of LGBT people, but it's an ad that's going to play very well to our community because it really shows that Wells Fargo understands the LGBT community, more so than what we've seen in the past of a white gay male couple. Also, in terms, kind of relating to the being in everyday situations, showing physical affection. This is something that we not only share with corporations who we work with, but also media outlets. There's a famous anecdote of a movie studio who was really rallying for a GLAAD Media Award, which is kind of our way of honoring the best and most outstanding images of the LGBT community for television, film, and news. And this movie studio sent us a movie where there was a high-profile gay couple, and in the end, they had one of the men put his hand on the other's shoulder. And even though they really were jockeying for the award, we had to go back to them and let them know that that wasn't enough, that perhaps if they would have kissed, perhaps if they would have embraced, and perhaps if they would have behaved like any other heterosexual couple did in this film, then you would have gotten the nomination. But next year, you as a film studio have to do better because that's what our community expects. You could see here a lot of the Marriott ad is a great one that Bob worked on. Couples embracing, couples being couples. The same with the Amtrak ad with an African-American same-sex couple who have children. They're being a family, they're not being a gay family. I think today, in terms of LGBT images and advertising or across the media, boring doesn't work, and you really have to push the envelope in order to break through what other companies are doing and to be seen as genuine and impactful. Working off of that too, I've selected here images that really show interracial couples and couples that cross ethnicities and nationalities. We really encourage people to push and recognize that LGBT people come from all races, ages, incomes, political and religious affiliations, professions, physical abilities, and gender expressions as well. One size does not fit all for our community. That's kind of a state of where we are in terms of LGBT media. All of the ads on this slide ran in LGBT press, whether it was a Pride book, LGBT websites, as the Marriott one was a digital campaign, or LGBT newspapers like the Washington Blade and Instinct and Advocate. But what we've seen in the past 2 years, which at GLAAD we've really been in the business of applauding because it's a huge step forward and it's happened really rapidly, is LGBT images in mainstream advertising campaigns. Those are the ones not marketed specifically into LGBT media, but in mainstream magazines or on outdoor campaigns. It really is, it's not only targeting LGBT people, but the broader American culture who today expects to see certainly gay and lesbian people when they open a magazine or when they turn on the television. We released a report last year that showed the highest number of LGBT characters on primetime TV ever. In advertising is a bit behind, but starting to catch up. And one of our advocacy efforts at GLAAD has been to push them to go forward and to include our families and our relationships in mainstream ads. Because, like I said, it's not only marketing these days to LGBT people, but my mom expects to see couples who look like her son when she looks at advertising. And America, especially younger America, are used to and expect and want to see these storylines. Looking at television, some of the most popular and most critically acclaimed shows like Glee, Modern Family, Grey's Anatomy are LGBT inclusive. It's a popular decision with audiences today. Also, I think one reason why we've seen companies begin to go mainstream with LGBT images and advertising is that there's a huge earned media component to all of these ads, especially the ones that you see here. The JCPenney ad, which we'll get into a bit more when we talk about our case study in a few minutes, was all over LGBT media. Even though this ad was a one-time buy or a one-time promotion in their JCPenney catalog, they expected and knew that it was going to go viral, if you will, and be spoken about in LGBT news, but also in larger pop culture news. Similar to that is the Johnson & Johnson campaign, where they partnered with PFLAG. It was a buy in family circles and really mainstream advertising. And I think one ad that probably is one of the most groundbreaking that we've seen in recent years is the Kaiser Permanente ad, which ran in Time Magazine, Family Circle, which showed a really diverse family, a great reflection of where America is today, with interracial couples, a child with a mental disability, Asian Americans, Black Americans, and a gay couple. And the tagline on that, if you could see, is "Stick around, things get interesting." One other ad would be Rock Vodka. Rock came to us kind of to get ideas for their ad campaign. They wanted to let the LGBT community know and let the broader America know that they were a proud supporter of GLAAD and of the LGBT community. So we worked with them to really come up with a creative tagline that spoke not only to their support of GLAAD, but to the support of the broader community. It's something that resonated really well in the focus groups that they did. That one other best practice that we really try to push is to do focus groups on your mainstream campaigns that are LGBT inclusive. Perhaps it's inclusive of the LGBT community in this campaign, perhaps it's not, but to get our community's feedback is going to be really important.
One thing, Rich, I want to posit in addition about especially the PFLAG campaign that is there. A number of campaigns are cause-related in a sense. They try to define some issues and concerns that are not just necessarily unique to the LGBT population, but very, very importantly resonate with them. In years ago, the caution that was combined with talking to gay people, HIV and AIDS was the channel of choice. It was deemed 20 years ago that talking to us as people living and dealing with HIV and AIDS was a way the market could speak to us without risk. Today, it's far more aggressive and much more thoughtful. And the Care with Pride campaign is really a very strong entrant into this category of cause-related marketing that actually had a retail opportunity and discount coupons for specific products from J&J that were available in Walgreens. So that was, I think, an interesting opportunity to really try to drive metrics, which some marketers are very keen to do, rather than a message advertising campaign. So I think we may see more of those opportunities.
One other point to make is that there's been a growth of the LGBT images, but there's also been a growth in the number and types of companies doing this work. Our first slide was really focused on the spirits and travel industries, and today we're seeing really brands that reflect Americana, like Johnson & Johnson and JCPenney, starting to include LGBT people not only in ads targeted to our community, but in mainstream ad campaigns, and a growing number of financial services companies like Kaiser, like Wells Fargo as well. And one program of GLAAD that we've done to encourage this growth of LGBT images in advertising and to honor the most outstanding ones is the GLAAD Amplifier Awards, which are held during Advertising Week in New York. Advertising Week, of course, is the premier conference for the ad industry, where thousands fly to New York for kind of the latest best practices, and we tend to be the big LGBT party of the evening. And it's not only a party, but a way for GLAAD to push for more and to push the envelope and encourage companies to go beyond stereotypes. All of the ads over the past two slides that I showed were nominated for GLAAD Amplifier Awards. One other section that I wanted to include would be the trans community. As for GLAAD, the transgender community is a huge priority for us in terms of growing the visibility of the community and growing understanding and acceptance. And one way we've seen corporations help out is to include transgender people in advertising campaigns. American Apparel, in a campaign that won a GLAAD Amplifier Award last October, included Isis King, who's a model who is trans and who was on America's Next Top Model in their LGBT mainstream pride campaign. So she was featured across a range of websites in their digital buy, and then also in American Apparel stores. It's a campaign that got a lot of earned media, meaning a campaign that got a lot of attention around it. So reporters were writing articles about American Apparel's decision to include a woman who is trans in their marketing campaign. So in addition to the ad buy, they also received a lot of great PR with GLAAD applauding them, and then also media industry reporters and advertising beat writers speaking about how American Apparel was breaking new ground and at the forefront of LGBT inclusion in their advertising.
Rich, one other common denominator I mentioned, those companies that have brands and are marketers that are eager to expand their audience, they're also conscious, and I'll touch on this next week in a little bit more about corporate reputation, but we look to advertisers that are offering lots of services and products to also be good corporate citizens, and I think that relationship between their actions, their policies, and their messaging is a critical one. The gay audience is no less cynical nor questioning about the motives of any marketer. And when the marketer has a better story to tell in all forms of media and that its brand is resonant with them in every way, then the paid advertising, the strategies they use here in the marketing are going to work that much better. And I think you have indicated that, Rich, and I think I just want to develop that a little bit next week as to what those indicators are.
Mm-hmm.
Great, sounds good. Well, let's get some input from the audience a little bit in terms of thinking about what you've seen in the media. Can you think of one famous LGBT person or a show or a media campaign from either television, movies that's really impressed you? If you type in your answer and go ahead and then hit submit, we'll read off what some of those responses are. And we've got Ellen DeGeneres, Modern Family. I know it was amazing to watch Ellen on, so many mainstream kind of ads with Penny. That was just amazing.
Well, it's interesting too, Pat. Years ago, and this is something that a lot of people remember, is that one of the greatest sports persons of our lifetime, of our generations, Martina Navratilova, failed to secure mainstream endorsements. If she had been a man and a straight man playing in her field, there's no question that she would have made a great deal of wealth based on that alone. But she was denied that for many years. Right,
and I know that one of the comments that we always make is Subaru did finally pick her up, and if you went to a lesbian bar, that's all you saw outside of the bar.
That's right. So that was her breakthrough opportunity, yep. Yeah.
So we've got Wanda Sykes, P&G Gain, Ellen. I've got one question from Elizabeth, and she asked about, do you think that American Apparel used a trans model for attention? I ask this because it's poor use of a young sexualized images of female models. So is there some thoughts about the motivation behind that?
Yeah. American Apparel actually came to GLAAD to say, what can we do for Pride Month? And we helped design a T-shirt line that said Gay OK for American Apparel. And when they got to speaking about the marketing campaign, we pushed them to use a transgender model. Isis, there were 2 trans people in this campaign that they used. Isis is someone who we've worked with for a long time and was really excited to have her first national campaign as a model. I think that, what was great about this campaign, I thought, was that she wasn't a trans model. It wasn't tokenizing, if you will. She was just another model and another face in a much broader campaign showcasing LGBT people in this case. And when the media reported on it, they were really supportive of the fact that that they used a model who was trans. There were also a lot of great fashion and modeling industries, newspapers like Women's Wear Daily and Fashion Inc., who were able to speak about the rise of models who are trans. So from the GLAAD end of things, we saw it as a way to not only show corporate America inclusive, but the growing inclusion of trans models in the modeling industry. I will leave it up for interpretation in terms of American Apparel's poses and whatnot for all of their models, regardless of gender and sexual orientation.
A larger issue with that. Yeah.
Yes.
So we got a couple more responses. Rosie O'Donnell, Chris mentioned before Ellen came out as a character on the episode near the end that she jumped out of the closet and said, "Bet you already knew it, didn't you?" So I mean, just some of those media moments that we remember, and that everybody's watching TV. I can remember being in a bar at an Ellen watching show. So let's take it to the next step then, Rich. Where are we going from here?
Yeah, well, I'm actually glad that you all brought up Ellen because it helps with our case study, actually. So Ellen came out in 1997, and of course on the front page of Time magazine, the famous "I'm Gay." After she came out, several advertisers dropped from her show because of anti-LGBT sentiment in our country and because of anti-LGBT organizations. Last year, in January of last year, I believe it was, JCPenney chose Ellen as their national spokesperson. JCPenney, to give you a sense of how far we've moved, JCPenney was one of the advertisers who dropped from the Ellen sitcom in '97. And now, fast forward to last year, where she's their national spokesperson and a representative of their brand. A group called the 1 Million Moms, which is a subset of the American Family Association, which is a really well-known anti-LGBT organization who focuses really on putting harm to LGBT families and trying to, the opposite of GLAAD, lower the visibility of LGBT people in our culture. Well, thankfully they are not doing a great job. But the 1 Million Moms called for JCPenney to drop Ellen as their national spokesperson and put out a call to action for their members to call JCPenney and voice their concerns with a gay woman who is married to a woman serving as the national spokesperson of one of America's most beloved brands. GLAAD saw this as a way to not only show support for LGBT people, but also to show corporate America that these tactics from the other side were no longer going to be successful, because we're living in a culture today where acceptance of LGBT people is growing tremendously and rapidly, and across races, political affiliations, faith traditions, even our sports leagues now. So we decided to start a Stand Up for Ellen campaign. And in addition to that, we also saw it as a way to tell America that Ellen, as a gay person, could be fired in 29 states. It's still perfectly legal to fire gay people in 29 states. For transgender people, it's 34 states just for being gay or trans. It could say gay on your pink slip, and that's acceptable. So we came up with a good message. It, of course, helped that everyone loves Ellen, and she's won several People's Choice Awards. But I think that Americans today, and a growing number of national polls show that they don't believe it's okay to fire someone just for being gay or trans. So our campaign came up with a message that used digital ways for people to speak out against the 1 Million Moms' really hateful tactics. And because the LGBT community and our allies are so vocal and active on social media, we launched a Twitter campaign, which several well-known celebrities tweeted. We started a Change.org petition, which really grew rapidly through a lot of earned media and attention on our campaign. And then we also spoke with JCPenney in a behind-the-scenes way to offer help on messaging. The 1 Million Moms, their main tactic was for people to call JCPenney, and from what we've heard, the calls against Ellen were really minimal to the calls in support and thanking JCPenney. This was really a large media moment early last year where people rallied around Ellen, rallied around JCPenney, and when JCPenney came out and said that they were standing behind Ellen, and in fact, not only were they going to stand behind Ellen, but they were going to put her in their Super Bowl ad. It became a moment when corporate America said to the other side, you're not going to have influence over us, and being pro-LGBT and LGBT inclusive is where we're going. I think a lot of corporations heard that, and several of the ads that you've seen in the previous slides came after that moment. I think the door is open right now for corporations to show their support for LGBT people, because as we've seen in this 1 Million Moms versus Ellen campaign, they folded. They dropped their campaign and said they were moving on to other things. And more importantly than that, the media around it was really supportive of JCPenney's decision, and GLAAD, of course, was there every step of the way to make sure of that. One thing that we tell corporations who may be hesitant to speak out about the fact that they're LGBT inclusive, or to go as far as including a gay person as their national spokesperson, is that organizations like GLAAD and our community and our allies are going to be there to thank you. In the last year around the marriage equality discussions and debates in 4 states around the election, there was Maryland, Maine, Washington, and Minnesota were all voting on marriage last November, and several corporations did the right thing and wanted to support those campaigns financially. Some of them were hesitant to do so and in a public way, and we at GLAAD worked with corporations like Nordstrom's to tailor their messaging and to also provide support. And what we saw here, just like in the Ellen campaign, is that the other side tried to do the same thing, but ultimately did not succeed. The Dump Starbucks campaign was started by the National Organization for Marriage after Starbucks gave a large sum to the campaign in Washington State for marriage for gay couples. It's really easy math. NOM, while they were speaking out in the press about this and launched an online campaign, got under 50,000 signatures. These numbers are updated as of last week, actually. And another pro-LGBT or progressive petition site, Some of Us, launched a Thank You Starbucks campaign, which got over 600,000 more signatures than NOM. A similar thing happened in Minnesota with the General Mills donation to the Minnesota campaign. We're seeing that it's really a good business decision for corporations to speak out for marriage equality, but more important than that, and something that has changed over the past few years and as our culture has grown more accepting, is that the backlash and potential protests or potential calls for protests are not happening, and if they are, they're really not going very far.
One thing I want to posit a little history lesson too, thanks Rich, is that with corporations 20 years ago, they were under a mistaken impression even then that backlash and discomfort when it was manifest, when it was emerging, was organic. And what we've all learned quickly over time is that no discomfort and backlash exists unless somebody wishes it to. And the organizations that have been most spearheading, boycott effort strategies, those organizations have realized they don't have much traction anymore. I talk to business writers and reporters like Rich does all the time, and they think it's a man-bite-dog story. They expect that the so-called million moms, which are neither million or moms, I think, they are the groups that are going to send out their message to their membership because it helps raise money. It motivates some of their members to get more active, but they just cannot stir people to object to things that in their communities and their lives and in the experience of these of Americans, especially younger Americans, are completely going the other way. So businesses are their spines have firmed up, and they've also witnessed that the rewards are far greater than the risks, and that they can take on some of these issues, including marriage equality. This is the sea change we'll see this year, because in past years we have not seen the numbers of corporate leaders aligned in the community to address any of these issues in the past, and now they see it as the future, and they view it as a message that they have to communicate, which they're doing in a variety of forums.
And I think you're seeing that because not only is it a good business decision, but it's also a good social decision because of the growing support for LGBT people. And that's across faith traditions. All the latest polls in terms of Black and Hispanic Americans are really growing in support of LGBT people and also for marriage equality as well. Pat asked a good question of any updates on Chick-fil-A. I think Chick-fil-A is an interesting example because they did, the owner of Chick-fil-A came out against marriage equality, and what was, I think, more unsettling for the community was that it was made public that Chick-fil-A was donating millions of dollars to anti-LGBT organizations that, like the Family Research Council, as well as organizations that practice the scientifically debunked idea of ex-gay therapy. And the community really came out, and it became a media story. It became a media story of the huge amount of loud negative PR that a company received for donating to anti-LGBT causes. It was the flip side of what we saw several years ago, where corporations who were making progress on LGBT issues were hearing from anti-LGBT people and engaging in negative PR campaigns around their giving to pro-LGBT groups. There's a lot of LGBT letters in that sentence. But Chick-fil-A, I think as a result, really started a national discussion of how there are very few corporations who are anti-LGBT today and who are giving to those causes. And if you do, you're going to be hearing from the media and from the community. Chick-fil-A, in kind of an update to that situation, I guess it was last week or the week before, has ultimately stated publicly that they are not giving to the most divisive of those anti-LGBT groups, to the ones who have anti-LGBT as part of their agenda. But also, I think, which is even a greater result, is that the president of Chick-fil-A, Dan Cathy, has been for several months speaking with the president of Campus Pride, an organization that works with LGBT college students, about his own relationship, his own life, and even went so far as to invite the president of Campus Pride to the Chick-fil-A Bowl on New Year's and to sit in his box next to Dan Cathy. So I think what we're seeing with corporations that might donate to anti-LGBT causes or not be pro-LGBT is that the community is starting dialogues with those corporate leaders, as I think is happening all over America with everyday people, because as people get to know LGBT people, acceptance is certainly growing at a very quick pace. And I think that brings us to our next question.
Okay, and thanks. That's great. I know we were trying to do a comparison between how the stock of Starbucks did versus the stock of Chick-fil-A, but because Chick-fil-A is not publicly traded, they couldn't do that. So I was glad to hear the story about the Chick-fil-A Bowl moving forward.
I think that that's kind of the best result. But one of the best results for our community is that someone who has spoken out against marriage is now coming to befriend a gay person. It's actually something there's a Huffington Post article that I encourage everyone to read by Shane Windmeyer, who's the head of Campus Pride, about his friendship, if you will, with Dan Cathy of Chick-fil-A. And it's a good example of how, whether it's the CEO of a major national brand or my grandma, that conversation is it could potentially move mountains.
Definitely, and it speaks to being able to tell that story. That's how powerful that is. So our next poll starts to bring this down now to a company level and to say, what is your company doing? What kind of marketing are you doing? Is it just in LGBT kind of media? And you can pick any ones that apply there. You can select several. Is it your local community? Do you do that locally and nationally? How about locally, nationally, and globally? Are you planning on doing some marketing? You're considering it, or is it not applicable? So it looks like we've got about half the folks on the call have answered so far, so I'm going to bring everybody back from that multitasking mode and get a few more answers in here. And it looks like overall for a lot of folks it's not applicable, again, if you're consulting, but a lot of what we're talking about is what companies are asking about and interested in finding out more about, so even being aware as a consultant is important. to be able to give folks a good idea of what's happening on the media. So looks like about 66% not applicable, 33% do marketing for the LGBT community on a local and a national level, and we got 16% that do that local, national, and global. So Rich, kind of how do you do this process? How do you begin to do these marketing campaigns?
Yeah, in addition to like the advertising that we've spoken about, I wanted to kind of also give an overview and some of the ways that we've worked with corporations to go one step further than an ad in LGBT media, or even just images and advertising, to speak about overall how we're working with corporations. The reason why GLAAD again is in this game is that we know the impact of the words and images that are LGBT inclusive. We've seen Joe Biden credit Will and Grace with evolving his views on marriage equality, and nothing can be stronger than being in a workplace for a parent of a LGBT person to know that your CEO, that your company is supportive of the community. In addition to it being a smart business decision, it's also a smart socially responsible decision in terms of CSR and corporate social responsibility. LGBT and diversity is a priority for so many companies. I think perhaps Chick-fil-A and Exxon are the only ones that don't include LGBT today. And for us, we know that in addition to being loyal consumers, companies should be reaching out to our community because those images are going to not only affect LGBT people, but grow overall support around the country. The business media has also really started to look at this and sees the LGBT community as kind of the next audience to court. And when I say LGBT community again, I think it's important not only to think about those consumers, but our friends and family and parents who are starting to accept or who are starting to expect to see LGBT people in corporate America and in marketing and advertising campaigns. One thing that we're telling our corporate partners is that it's not really enough to put a gay pride, it's not really enough to put a float in a gay pride parade once a year. It's more about putting couples in mainstream ads. It's more about creating that workplace that is very LGBT inclusive. And then also it's about reflecting the diversity of our community and, again, putting images of family and speaking about LGBT and family. And this is internal and external as well. And we work with, at GLAAD, probably over 120 corporate partners, and what we've seen on that front is that writing a check is not enough for either our corporate partner or for GLAAD. What we really look to do is create signature partnerships that involve our mission. GLAAD has a great mission to work with media or corporations on because it's all about growing that visibility of LGBT people. And what we've tried to do is come up with new and inventive ways to engage not only our corporate partners and the people who are writing checks for sponsorships, but the employees and the allies in those companies. Because from a mission perspective, those are really the people who we see as ways of growing equality and ways of growing visibility and acceptance of the LGBT community. Those are the people who are essentially going to be voting on marriage equality and for employment non-discrimination laws. So those are the people who we want on our side, and corporations are a great channel to grow that support. So one program that we do at GLAAD, and that involves hundreds of organizations and corporations, but that GLAAD has become the hub of, is Spirit Day, which was started in 2010 after the high-profile attention that suicides of LGBT or LGBT-perceived young people were receiving. It came after Jamie Rodemeyer and Tyler Clementi and those stories of tragedy. A young person in Canada who was 15 posted an idea on Tumblr that wouldn't it be great if everyone wore purple one day? Purple symbolizes spirit on the rainbow flag, and wouldn't that be a great way to tell LGBTQ kids in your schools that you support them, and more importantly, tell potential bullies that they're on the wrong side of things and they're in the minority. And so we first heard this idea through a Facebook page at GLAD, and the Facebook page was starting to be inundated with really violent images and disgusting messages about the LGBT community. Really, internet trolls were attacking this page that young people were going to saying, oh, I'll wear purple. Then they were being met with these really anti-LGBT messages and photos. We started work with Facebook at that point to create a Facebook that that people can report such messages and harmful images around the LGBT community to Facebook, and Facebook wound up actually monitoring that event page 24 hours a day. But then we sat back at GLAD and thought, all right, well, this is great. Like, there are a few 100,000 teens on this Facebook page, but how can we make it bigger? So we started to go to our organizational partners, and we now have over 130 organizations, from American Federation of Teachers to several of the LGBT groups, including Out and Equal, participating and spreading the word. We have groups like Listen and Trevor Project and GSA Network helping us get into schools. And then we also went to our friends in Hollywood and in the news media and worked to ensure that Spirit Day was going to be observed and last year in October, it was observed by the Today Show, Good Morning America, all cable news networks, including Fox News, which my jaw hit the floor when that happened, observed Spirit Day. And it was not only wearing purple, but the hosts of these television programs telling parents and young people out there that they will stand up against bullying and that they support LGBT young people. We also last year started work with sports leagues and got all national sports leagues, including NASCAR, to observe Spirit Day, whether that's involving their athletes wearing purple or going purple on Twitter. We saw from all of our allies, whether in Hollywood or other organizations, they wanted a way, and a simple way, of showing that they support the LGBT community. Not marriage, not a political issue, but just they support LGBT young people, and as a way to respond to the bullying that was happening around the country. And we thought that it was a great way to also involve our corporate partners who are looking, like I said, to do more than write a check. So we've seen a tremendous uptick in corporate support from when we first started in 2010. And a diverse range of industries represented. Last year, some of the highlights, the CEO of PepsiCo spoke out with a quote about Spirit Day. Yahoo had purple photo booths in all of their campuses around the globe, where people could take photos in a purple photo booth and then share it on their social media. Some of the other companies, like Ernst & Young and PwC and financial groups, spoke about Spirit Day in internal newsletters and really helped spread the word. As a result, Spirit Day has really taken on a life of its own, and I hope everyone will consider, everyone on this call will consider joining us this year in October to, and again, it's really a great way because we've seen that corporations are starting to sponsor organizations, starting to involve LGBT people in advertising, all the things that we talked about on this call. But this is another way, and really a very visible and a low ask to engage your employees and engage those straight allies in the workplace, and to put your foot down and say that you do support the LGBT community. And you can find more about Spirit Day through our social media. The official website for Spirit Day is glad.org/Spirit Day. And that was all I had. So I guess we could open up to questions.
Sounds good. I also wanted to put up a few more resources that are here. Any other thoughts, Bob, before we kind of get your questions?
Well, the thing that I'm really excited about, I love the arc of your story too, Rich, because it covers so much change. What's interesting now is the opportunity for business to engage in a lot of different ways that are public, that are commercial, that are cause-related, that are truly inclusive, and to do so without the fear and risk that they experienced in the past, but also to grow a larger non-LGBT audience. Before, there was so much concern in communications that we had to talk just to gay people. And now we know that if we don't talk to their families, allies, coworkers, and neighbors, then we're missing the whole story. And Spirit Day is one of the most profound ways we do that, among others. But those are really game changers and very, very important. So I'm very jazzed by the narrative we had today.
That's great. And Rich Joe had a question on this one. He really liked the CNBC quote. Where's that from? He was just asking for a source on that.
That's from a story that ran on CNBC.com. It was actually around the Boy Scouts issue because we're seeing a lot of corporations pull money from the Boy Scouts. It's something that GLAD has worked on in a behind-the-scenes role to educate some of the corporate partners of the Boy Scouts about this policy and urge them to speak out. HRC also, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, announced that corporations who give money to the Boy Scouts or to organizations with anti-gay policies on the national level will not be able to earn a 100 score on the Corporate Equality Index from HRC.
That's right.
Again, it's not that. Again, with the Boy Scouts, it's not that they have an explicit policy that open or avowed homosexuals are not allowed to participate. And as a result, over the past year, we've seen them put that into practice and seen a lot of young gay teenagers who have spent 12 years in scouting and were about to earn their Eagle Scout badge be turned away. We've seen moms having to tell their 7-year-old kids that they're not able to serve as their den leader just because they're gay. And I think America is now, like Bob said, we're at the point where being anti-LGBT is going to be looked at unfavorably.
Definitely. Well, and we're also seeing some of that around some of the military benefits and things like that. I know a lot of stories of the families and the impacts on, as military members are being killed in theater and those kind of things. So it really is talking about that story piece, again, how important that is, and getting those images, because it kind of makes it a fairness issue then when you start to talk about that rather than just facts and figures.
Well, the other thing I want to, and I'll do this in my talk next week, is communicate what Rich has described as a more accurate and authentic portrait of gay people. One of the things there was many missteps at the beginning of some of the marketing strategies that gay people were all affluent. And one thing we obviously know is that isn't true, but people come from all walks of life. They are under many circumstances, and many times they're disadvantaged because public policies don't allow them to raise children in the same fair way or to have the safety nets that every other couple and household takes for granted. So if they choose to raise kids together, and if they choose to do certain things, the barriers and penalties that add expense to their lives mean they have less to spend in the market space. So the idea of wealth and affluence as one of the mythologies is something we've long dispelled and gotten a richer, more authentic portrait of gay households.
Definitely. And are we seeing some more progress in different sectors? I mean, is it kind of following the early adapters and the Corporate Equality Index for doing the best at marketing?
It's a good question, Pat. My view of it and the history of it is the clear front runners at the beginning were more of the alcohol companies and others that were looking for niche audiences at the time. But one of the great widespread industries I think that's out there, in addition to the advanced electronics and software and the digital space. You see a lot of the Googles and Microsofts today, but also hospitality and travel. The airlines, the hotels, the destinations, they understood that there was power in reaching an audience that had a big appetite to travel, wanted to be welcomed equally and fairly, and wanted to experience the world. A lot of gay people may have decided that where they grew up wasn't a space that they felt welcoming, and they wanted to take flight to find community everywhere. They wanted to travel to places where they could have adventure and meet people. And sometimes it was tough when you stay home and you can't meet people. And I think travel and hospitality got it early and widespread, and you see that globally, that global experience.
Right, and I think I saw some numbers that actually said that during the recession, that in terms of minority buying power, that the LGBT community was continuing to put a lot of that into travel.
It's more resistant to the trends because what we discovered even after 9/11 through some data is that gay people were quicker to return to travel after 9/11, believing that that was still a very important part of their pocketbook. They wanted to keep going and traveling even after there was resistance across the market. The other thing I was noticing, and Rich, you've noticed it, Las Vegas, when we had the downturn in 2007 and 8 and the collapse of housing, advertising took a tumble everywhere. In the market, obviously, everything shrank. The whole economy shrank. But the Las Vegas economy found its sea legs, and a lot of the industry there decided the gay market mattered to them a lot, and they started doing a great deal. The Caesars and other gaming operations in the city had really invested a great deal more bandwidth in terms of reaching gay travel.
In addition to that, Las Vegas, last year for Spirit Day, every hotel on the Las Vegas Strip turned their marquees purple at 2 times during the day with an anti-bullying message, and the Welcome to Las Vegas sign turned purple as well. It was really an amazing visual.
That's great.
Hey,
Are we
Zach,
seeing the same kind of trend around the world?
Around the world, a lot of it in Europe, and actually increasingly Latin America. Latin America is a major political and cultural sea change in Latin America. You know, I do point out too, it's interesting that we're the only continent, North America is the only continent where you can actually, same-sex couples can be married in all 3 capitals. There's no other continent in the world, I think, where that's true. Well, we don't even have it in Australia. There's a question here about B2B, using LGBT images.
Yeah, that's the question.
That's a great question because that comes up from time to time. There's 2 examples that are important to know. One of them is primarily, actually, I think Out and Equal is one of those platforms. Is there's a B2B interest in talent, so that there's a lot of LGBT talent advertising, and I've seen it also in human resource and in professional journals. Even my client, American Airlines, did one about their legal talent. They have, as it turns out, some very strong LGBT attorneys, and they put an ad together for a legal journal just to showcase them. So I think in talent you find it, but also IBM has been one of the leaders in trying to do B2B marketing and using LGBT credentials and reputation to speak to that and to speak to companies that share their values. And so I think they're the other example.
Yeah. And that's also where sponsorship of LGBT events like the GLAAD Media Award come into play, or strong presences at conferences like Out and Equal.
Yes.
That's right. Well, and I'm sure we're going to continue this discussion through next week as we get more information. But I wanted to give you both a little bit, just to make some closing comments and thoughts, kind of wrapping up the day. So, Rich, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I mean, speaking from GLAAD, which is, like I said, a storyteller of the LGBT community in a group working to advance visibility, I would encourage everyone to think about new ways that you can show your corporations or your clients ways to support and to show your support for the LGBT community, whether that's external or internal.
And Bob?
And I'll just add simply this notion is that we're at warp speed because, again, if you think of the arc of change in imagery and advertising and marketing, it's the last 25 years we have seen from the tiny steps to great acceleration, and I think it mirrors. In fact, I would say this. It advances the political dialogue so much more. Business are major change agents in our culture. Consumer-driven strategies are changing the face of our culture and acceptance of LGBT people far faster than even the political leadership can catch up.
Totally agree with that. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the call today. We had a couple of technical issues, but know that we're going to send you out a complete recording of this so you can play it just online. And that you'll be able to participate in that. When the call ends and we drop off, we'll stop the meeting, and there's a short survey, so you please take that and give us some feedback. We'll be back next week with Bob looking at LGBT marketing data and strategy in Part 2. and we'll start that at 1 p.m. Pacific on that. I think we're going to start a little bit later. We're going to just be coming from a call, so I know some folks may be going to the kickoff for the summit, and so we'll probably start about 5 minutes after on that call, but no worries that we'll get through the full time to do that. If you have any other questions or need any more information, check out the website or contact Q and I. And again, Rich and Bob, thanks, and we're looking forward to the next couple of weeks. So, thanks, everybody.